let's look at maybe the
an
best
active
evidence we
disaster.
have is the actual screenshot. Can you put the screenshot up on the screen? Let's look at what the text message said. The text message said, implement best practices. Like, this is the best practices. We're going to implement them. And they talk about making sure you're going in pairs or with more than one person, avoid the Trump homes, drink your water, take your towel, coconut waters. So stay hydrated, walk with someone else, and don't go to the Trump homes. It seems pretty common and matter of fact in the actual evidence we do have, the text message itself. But you're still saying Miss Washington and this other person aren't telling the truth.
When I received this text message, it was not in accordance with the way we conduct business at FEMA, and I directed
Even though it said
termination.
best practices, even though it said stay hydrated, which everyone would agree with, even though it said go in pairs, which everyone would agree with, even though it said bring a towel, make sure you're covered. I mean, it said coconut water is the best way to stay, even though it said all those practical things, the part about avoiding the Trump homes, that's not a best practice, that's not commonplace. Is that what you're saying?
That is nowhere in our policy, and I can't speak to
I'm
the
not saying it's in your
motivations
policy.
behind what Ms. Washington did.
But it was, okay, now her supervisor, this Mr. Hershey, have you talked to him and to find out if he knew this was happening?
I understand that he was in her chain of command, and this is under investigation.
Have you talked to there's 13 people on this text message. Have you talked to all 13 of those individuals?
This incident is under investigation.
That's not what I asked you. I know it's under investigation, and we know how investigations work when it's done inside the agency. It takes forever. I'm asking, did you talk to the 13 people on this best practices text message?
The Office of Professional Responsibility has taken this, and they are following appropriate protocol to investigate.
Is the Inspector General looking at it as well?
And I have asked the Inspector General to take a look at this.
Any idea when they're going to talk to these 13 people since you have it? Have you talked to, how about you personally? Have you talked to any of these 13 people?
I have not talked to them.
You have not talked to any
I
of them?
have an entire team that focuses on this investigation, and that's what they're doing.
Seems to me it's part of a mindset that's in government. And this is the scary part, because I think it's broader.
Let's be honest about what's happening here today. My Republican colleagues want to cherry pick this incident and sensationalize it. Well, the reality is that for decades, there has been different treatment by FEMA, for instance, towards Black and brown communities. Hurricanes Katrina, Maria, Ida, Florence, Harvey, we all saw communities of color served last or not at all. And those are difficult to discuss, but important. Several reports and investigations confirmed what those of us who are part of those communities already knew, that white disaster victims were helped first and with more money than Black people of color, even when the damage was the same. Rather than fixate on a single incident, this committee should be working to ensure that the entire system is equitable for all Americans and that we're building on the work of the administration to make that so. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would also like to thank Administrator Criswell for being here with us today on a very long day, obviously. But let's be real, what FEMA does has never been more critical, because right now, climate change has completely flipped the script. Storms like Milton and Helene hitting landlocked states, that was unthinkable not too long ago. But now we've got places like Asheville, North Carolina, 2,000 feet above sea level and hundreds of miles from the coast, getting wrecked by hurricanes and extreme weather. So Administrator Criswell, as we're seeing more frequent and intense storms, what new challenges are you seeing emerge for your agency?
As you mentioned, Congresswoman, we are seeing events like we have not seen before. I mean, I can think back to a year ago with the wildfires in Maui that were happening at the same time that we had a hurricane in the Pacific heading towards the desert lands of California. The types of events and severe weather events that we are seeing at a scale that we have not seen previously. I mean, as an example, 117-ish disasters last year, and we have over 170 already declared this year. The challenges we face is making sure as we are rebuilding these communities that we do so in a way that makes them stronger against future storms, and not just the risks that they've faced in the past, but the risks that they will face in the future.
Certainly. So as climate change worsens, then would you say that your agency is going to need more resources or fewer resources?
I think we will definitely need more resources to be able to keep up with the pacing demand of the events that we've been responding to.
Certainly. It doesn't take a genius to figure that one out. More disasters in more areas mean more help will be needed. The climate crisis is here. Pretending that it doesn't exist or that it won't get worse only harms the people that we have been sent to this body to represent. For the sake of not only my constituents, but people all over the country who may face natural disasters they've never even thought to prepare for, I hope hope that we can all come together to give the American people the help that they deserve. That means making sure that FEMA is fully funded and that they are serving all survivors of natural disasters. While we're reflecting and analyzing our disaster response, I'd like to ask you, Administrator Criswell, what has FEMA done to ensure that all communities, particularly the most marginalized, are being fully served? How has there been improvements since previous storms where we have seen critiques or even difficulties in administering service?
You know, I have served as a local emergency manager, and I understand what it is like to be a customer of FEMA. I have seen people within my own communities that have had a hard time accessing the programs. One of the first things that I did was change some of our policies to ensure that we understand everybody's unique needs. For example, we know that many homeowners in all parts of the country don't have traditional mortgages or traditional deeds to their homes, and so we expanded the types of documentation that we accept from people so they can access our programs. These are the kind of barriers that were affecting people everywhere, and we wanted to make sure that everyone that was impacted by a disaster could access our programs with minimal amount of barriers. Those are the changes that we've made. We continue to make more. There's more work to do.
Certainly, but those are such critical steps that we've seen results from. So we thank you for that. I don't think it can be stressed enough how important FEMA is going to be in the years to come. The climate crisis means recognizing that we're about to see weather events we've just never expected. Hurricanes ravaging inland communities, uncontrollable wildfires, as you've mentioned, across more areas of the country, uncontrollable tornadoes, floods, severe storms that are upending lives. Every dollar not invested in FEMA now is just going to burn us in the years to come. When communities are level, it costs more money to fix. We have no choice but to invest if we don't want to see communities completely erased after climate catastrophes. I agree with my colleagues across the aisle that partisanship has no place in distributing government services and aid, neither does race or socioeconomic status. That being said, as more and more of our constituents are affected by increasing natural disasters, it's more important than ever that we maintain that same commitment to nonpartisan distribution of aid in the coming years. I thank you again for joining us and for your testimony today, and I yield back.
I just want to make sure I understand what 4 hours and 20 minutes of fuss is about. Miss Washington was a crew lead charged with helping to provide assistance to individuals in the following the hurricane. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. You said that FEMA has 22,000 employees?
More than.
More than 22,000. Okay. And as I understand it, as soon as you saw verified written evidence that Miss Washington used partisanship in executing her job, you immediately terminated her.
Correct.
And you're now doing an investigation to determine whether anyone else was involved in this.
Correct.
Seems like that's the right thing to do. You have a bad apple out of 22,000, and you identified it and you fired it. I don't understand what the massive fuss here is. It's obviously, as you say, unacceptable conduct, and you acted immediately. So this, I've not been in here all day, but I've heard the same questions 5 times myself. I'm sure you've heard them many more times. But it does beg the question about what happens to FEMA if partisanship bleeds into its mission. And I want to bring up 2 examples from the last administration. Hurricane Maria, you may recall, in September of 2017, hit Puerto Rico, resulting in nearly 3,000 deaths. Donald Trump was president then, and he blocked the full release of the emergency assistance appropriated by Congress in 2018 and permitted only a small percentage of the money to go to the island. He insisted that Puerto Rico was not in need of that assistance and alleged that the death tolls had been politically inflated, quote, to make me look as bad as possible. In November of 2018, California suffered the most destructive and deadliest wildfire in the state's history. Donald Trump according to his own former National Security Council staffer, refused to approve disaster aid because the state of California had a Democratic governor and did not vote for him. In fact, this former staffer had to go and pull out the voting records from Orange County where the fire was to show Donald Trump that Orange County had more supporters for Trump than the entire state of Iowa, so that he would ultimately release the funding. Now, that appears to me to inject partisanship in administering disaster relief. Is that your understanding of what I just recited to you, Ms. Criswell?
I was not the FEMA administrator during that time, and I would not care to comment on that.
Well, I think it's pretty self-evident that that is exactly what it was. And this now has continued in the recent disasters. We're here focused on one rogue employee who was justifiably and correctly fired. But Donald Trump went on a misinformation campaign to slander your organization. He at one point said that President Biden was sleeping and he was not responding to Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. Brian Kemp responded, "The president just called me yesterday afternoon and I missed him and I called him right back and he just say, 'Hey, what do you need?' And I told him, 'You know, we've got what we need. We'll work through the federal process.'" How about this one? Governor Ron DeSantis. Everything we've asked for from President Biden, he has approved. And we do think we'll get more approvals. Republican Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia. We got what we need from FEMA. We've had FEMA embedded with us since, a day or two before the storm hit. Governor Glenn Youngkin, Republican of Virginia. I'm incredibly appreciative of the rapid response and the cooperation from the federal team at FEMA. Yet Donald Trump was spreading misinformation that FEMA was not doing its job. And in the last few seconds, I'd like for you to explain how that misinformation hindered FEMA's efforts to provide disaster relief to those in need.
Any type of misinformation that creates some type of mistrust in the federal government creates a lack of opportunity for individuals that have been impacted by these disasters to get the assistance that they need and that they're eligible for. And we want to be able to reach out to everybody that has been impacted and assure them that we are there to support them. They should register for assistance, and we can work with them to help them on their road to recovery.
And do you think that there were some people who did not receive disaster assistance because of this misinformation by Donald Trump?
We will never know if there are people that should have applied and didn't, but there is the possibility that individuals may not have applied for assistance because of what they were reading across social media.
Okay. Well, there are plenty of publications and media reports about that being the case, and it is a terrific shame. And thank you very much, Administrator Criswell, for all of your hard work during difficult times. I yield back.